When we think of World War II, images of tanks, warplanes, and weary soldiers often come to mind. The scope of the war was vast, fought in the air, across oceans, in deserts, cities, and frozen mountains. But behind the human heroes of the war, there were others, quiet, loyal, and often overlooked. Animals played a vital role in the Second World War, not just as companions, but as couriers, workers, rescuers, and sometimes even symbols of hope. In this video, we explore the remarkable and very real stories of animals who served during one of history's darkest times. Stories that speak not only to bravery, but to the deep connection between humans and the creatures who stood beside them. Dogs were among the most widely used animals in the war. They served in nearly every theater, with militaries on all sides training them for various essential roles. Some were messenger dogs, carrying critical information across battlefields where radios were unreliable or destroyed. The Germans trained their dogs to follow scent trails, laid out using a molasses-like substance. One such dog, a German shepherd named Caesar, famously ran over 10 miles in just over half an hour, delivering a vital message that helped redirect an artillery barrage. Others were scout or sentry dogs. These animals used their keen senses to detect approaching enemy forces long before human ears or eyes could. In the Pacific, American Marines often relied on dogs to alert them to Japanese ambushes in the dense jungles. Their instincts saved countless lives. In Britain, as bombs rained down during the Blitz, search and rescue dogs like Jet and Rip roamed the rubble of collapsed buildings, sniffing for survivors. Jet, a black Alsatian, once stayed with a buried woman for 12 hours, refusing to leave her side until she was safely pulled from the debris. Both Jet and Rip would later be awarded the Dickin Medal, the animal equivalent of the Victoria Cross. Not all dog stories were so heroic in tone. The Soviet Union trained dogs to act as anti-tank weapons. These dogs were fitted with explosives and trained to run underneath enemy tanks. Tragically, the dogs often became confused, sometimes returning to their own lines and detonating among Soviet troops. It was a dark and desperate tactic, and one that ultimately saw limited success and great loss. But dogs didn't only serve on the front lines. In the field hospitals and among wounded troops, some dogs simply offered comfort. One such dog was Smokey, a tiny Yorkshire Terrier found in a foxhole in New Guinea. She weighed only 4 pounds, but she would go on to serve in 12 combat missions, surviving air raids, and even helping lay communication wire through a narrow pipe. Her work saved engineers from days of dangerous trench digging. After the war, Smokey continued her service as one of the first therapy dogs for returning veterans. Pigeons may not seem like wartime heroes, but during World War II, these birds were essential to battlefield communication, more than 200,000 pigeons were used by Allied and Axis forces alike. Why pigeons? In the chaos of war, especially during surprise landings or in deep enemy territory, radio lines were often cut or jammed. Pigeons, trained to return to their home lofts, could travel hundreds of miles, carrying messages strapped to tiny canisters on their legs. One pigeon, named Gustav, flew more than 150 miles from the beaches of Normandy on D-Day, carrying back the very first message that the landings had been successful. His message reached Allied command 5 hours before other confirmation. For this, Gustav received the Dickon Medal. Another bird, G.Y. Joe, an American pigeon, saved over 100 lives in Italy. Allied forces were preparing to bomb a village, unaware that British troops had taken it. G.I. Joe was released just in time and flew 20 miles in 20 minutes, delivering the warning and halting the airstrike with minutes to spare. These birds were silent, swift, and extraordinarily dependable, and in some cases, they were the only line of communication soldiers had. In terrains where trucks and tanks couldn't go, up steep mountains, across deserts, and through thick jungle, armies turned to age-old companions, pack animals. Mules were used extensively, particularly in the Italian campaign and the Burma front. Their strength and endurance allowed them to carry ammunition, food, and even wounded soldiers through landscapes where vehicles couldn't pass. British and American forces relied on thousands of them to support the front lines. In the Middle East and North Africa, camels proved their worth in desert warfare. They were able to go for days without water, making them ideal for long supply routes. Some were even outfitted with stretchers to carry the wounded. Horses were still used in surprising numbers, particularly on the Eastern Front. The German Wehrmacht entered the war with more horses than trucks, and the Soviet Red Army made heavy use of cavalry and draft horses. Many of these animals perished under horrific conditions, from starvation, cold, and exhaustion. And in the Far East, elephants were used in both construction and transport. In Burma, they helped Allied forces move heavy equipment through jungle paths and rebuild bridges destroyed by retreating Japanese troops. Some animals became legends. One of the most famous was Wojtek, a Syrian brown bear, a adopted by Polish soldiers in Iran. As a cub, he was taken in by a supply company, fed condensed milk from a bottle, and raised among the troops. He drank beer, wrestled with the men, and learned to carry heavy crates of artillery shells. When the unit reached Italy, Wojtek was officially enlisted as a soldier, so he could travel aboard a military transport. He even had a service number and rank, Private Wojtek. After the war, Wojtek retired in Scotland, where he lived peacefully until his death in 1963. Then there was Judy, a liver and white pointer who served aboard a Royal Navy gunboat in the Far East. After surviving the sinking of her ship, she helped lead stranded survivors to fresh water. She was later captured and taken to a Japanese POW camp, where she protected fellow prisoners and boosted morale. Judy was smuggled out of the camp at great risk and later awarded the Dickin Medal. We also remember Gander, a Newfoundland dog with the Royal Rifles of Canada. During the Battle of Hong Kong, Gander charged a group of Japanese soldiers, grabbing a live grenade in his mouth and running it away from his unit. He was killed instantly, but saved several lives in the process. He was posthumously awarded the Dickin Medal more than 50 years later. The animals of World War II did not wear uniforms. They didn't choose to serve. But their contributions, their sacrifices, were real. They carried messages, transported supplies, found survivors in rubble, calmed frightened soldiers, and in some cases, gave their lives. In the long shadow of war, these creatures were more than tools. They were companions. They brought comfort, loyalty, and moments of levity amid chaos. And while they could not speak, their actions told stories of resilience, courage, and trust. As we remember the human toll of the Second World War, we also remember those who walked, ran, flew, or crawled beside us, the animals who, in their own way, helped shape the course of history. Thank you for watching and for honoring their memory.